the way they give you the data, it's saying if nothing changes in your instruction, in your delivery, those kids...
They'll get the same score.
Right. That's where they're projected to score at the end of this year.
Lynette, and there's, well, I see advanced on the next page, but it doesn't distinguish then those students who are advanced based upon their...
Right. The first page that you're looking at, when it says proficiency and above, so it puts proficient and advanced students together.
Yeah.
So when you open up the list and you can see the student names, then you could see how they're scoring and if they were proficient or advanced. But that particular report is just towards proficient. It just looks at proficient or not proficient. Okay. So we'll go to the next report, and that's the school performance diagnostic. And this is actually the one I know, normally I come in every semester and I work with Tiffany, and I'll present during the leadership courses on this. This is probably the report that I spend the most time on, because this is the one that probably gives you the most information as far as instructional implications. So this particular report is looking at, the test is PSSA reading for 8th grade for 2014. So then when you look at the bar graph, the blue is the first
one.
So the first bar each time is 2014, the current year, and then the second bar is the previous school year. Okay? And then across the bottom it's looking at your achievement levels from below basic to advanced. Then you have the red whisker in the middle, and that gives you your standard error. And then if you look at it, you can't see it on yours, but the line, can I hold this for a second? Mm-hmm. The line that they're actually sitting on is a green line. That green line is significant because the green line, which we would think of that as being 0, that green line means that they made adequate growth for the year. So the green line is, all things being equal, you didn't lose any ground with those kids from one year to the next. Above the line means that you're growing them, and when they go below the line, that means that they're losing ground. Okay?
And based upon a year's growth each year.
Based on, if you think about the first sheet that you were looking at, so this is 2014. What this particular chart, what it would have said in 2013 as far as their projection, based on this, how they were projected to do. Now you have for the current year, this is how they actually performed. Okay? So that it's a diagnosis of their actual performance. So Pvaas does two things. Some of the reports look forward and some look back. This is a look back report, whereas the first one we were looking at is actually a look forward report. Okay? Okay. So
is this third box the same color as the first one?
Yes. I don't know if you can see this. So the first two bars are for below basic students. So the first bar is how they performed this year, and then the second one, which is lighter, that's how they performed the previous year. Okay? And then the next one is for basic students. You can see there's a bar for this year. Last year they were flat. They were right on the green line. And then proficient students, this year they're flat on the green line. The year before they were above it. And then the advanced kids, both years they were below it.
So we can say that last year, based on this yellow box, there were lots of below basic kids, but this year there were many fewer on this particular graph.
You could say that last year's students who were below basic, completely different group of kids.
Oh, that's right.
Last year's 8th graders, the ones who were below basic, you grew them. So you probably pulled some of them out of below basic. You grew a large majority of them because you can see how large the bar is. Okay. This year, the kids that you had at below basic, you grew them. You didn't grow them as much, but you can't really make a statement from that because
It's a
it's two
different
different kids, and it's the amount of growth. It's not the number of kids.
Okay.
All right. Couple of other things on this page, and I'm going to give you something that actually helps to interpret this page a little bit better. Down at the bottom, you have the chart, so it looks at the 2014, and it gives you the growth, it gives you the standard error, and the number of students. So you can actually click on those numbers, because when you're on it electronically, the numbers are in blue, they're hyperlinked, and you can see who the kids are. What you have to do with this data is figure out, what does this say about instruction in the school? Because this is the look backwards. So it's saying, what did we do? This is our end result based on what we did last year. So what should we do to change that for the next year? Okay, so let me look at something else real quick. Okay, so your next page is basically the same exact thing. It's just looking at math.
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm going to show you this, if you could. Let's pass those down.
Keep one to a file or something?
And I can send you a copy of this electronically. So this is
I have
what,
two.
when I come in and work with the students, this is a big part of the work that I do with them, taking a look at this, because this gives you a way of understanding what this particular pattern on this graph, what it's telling you. So there's 6 different patterns here, and it kind of tells you exactly what's happening. So if you take a look at the first one, that's called a shed pattern. So there, you can see how there's a lot of growth with the below basic students, but then your advanced students are below that green line. That means that in that building, they're focusing a lot on interventions, and they're moving their bottom kids, but at the same time, they're losing their higher kids because they're not providing the amount of rigor and acceleration that those kids need. The next one is called the reverse pattern, where your below basics are actually losing even more ground and are getting further behind, whereas your advanced students are continuing to grow. So here, normally this happens in schools where they've traditionally had very high performance, and they focus on a lot of kids who may be gifted or providing enrichment, but this may be a school that's struggling with supporting students who are at the more intensive range. The next one is a tent pattern, where you can see the below basic kids, they dropped, and then your advanced kids are below, but the kids right in the middle are actually showing growth. That is a system that focuses on the middle learners, so that would be teachers are in a building where the instruction is geared towards, here's what everybody needs, and I teach to the middle, I teach what everyone needs, and I'm not thinking about the kids who need intervention, and I'm not thinking about the kids who need enrichment. Then you have the reverse of the tent, which is the V pattern. That's where you have a lot of interventions, and you have a lot of enrichments, but then you're not focusing on the core. So so in a system like that, everyone's getting something special, but then the kids in the middle who kind of, you just need to make sure that they're maintaining. If they don't fall into that really low group or the really high group, those are the kids that are getting lost. And then the next one is the opportunity gap pattern, where everyone is growing except for one group. So that kind of tells you, okay, we're doing good with interventions, we're doing good with enrichment, but those kids who are kind of at the middle and, maybe our system isn't quite working out for them, maybe we just don't know what to do because you have one group that has that drop. And normally the opportunity gap, it could be in any of the columns, but that tells you that's the group that you need to focus on. And then, of course, the desirable pattern, where you have your below basics are having the most amount of gain because they're normally behind where they should be for their grade level. So you do need to provide intensive enrichments for them to get them caught up, but you're also not losing your advanced kids. So everyone's moving up, but they're moving up at a rate that corresponds to where they are. So when we look at this, and going back to the data that you have in your packet, It's really saying, do they understand? If I'm looking at this, and this is probably a little bit more challenging to interpret, so I'm going to try to interpret it out loud to see where would I put it in here, and we may disagree because this one is a little bit all over the place. So in this system, the below basic kids are growing. Okay, so that's good.
Which one are we looking at?
Your basic kids, remember the green is like, that's, you haven't lost anybody. That's adequate growth. So having that flat line where it looks like there isn't a bar, that is actually okay. Okay? So with the basic kids, let's see, for this year, for 2014, you moved them. The year before, they were pretty flat. So that means you kind of exceeded a year's worth of growth for them. That's good. You have your proficient kids. So the previous year, you grew them. This year, you didn't lose any. You know, they're right around that green line. You see how they're actually just below it? That's why that whisker is important. So mine, the whisker is red, and the whisker, that's that standard error rate, like standard error. So to say, as long as they're somewhere within that red, they're okay. So even though they're right below the green line, it's actually okay because they're within the range of the whisker. So it could just be a statistical error there. But so for last year, you grew them considerably. This year, you didn't lose any. You know, maybe it's a different group. Maybe you just didn't have as much of a need. So it's not bad. Then you're advanced. You grew a lot last year. You lost a lot last year. This year, you lost kids. You didn't lose as many, but you lost kids. So with that, I'll give you a chance to answer. Which of these patterns do you think that is?
Oh, a shade.
Looks a lot like shed.
Shed.
That's the shed pattern. Okay. So with this one, the candidate would need to understand who is the group that you should be focusing on right here. You definitely want to focus on enrichment and acceleration for that advanced group because we're losing them, and within a year, that means all of your other groups are going to get larger. But then you could also make a case for, because the growth with the other groups isn't as large either, you want to focus on them. But your targeted area should be what's happening with your advanced kids. Why are you losing them?
Lynette, the name of these patterns, is this something you've come up with, or is this from the state?
This is from the state. This is
So other
part of
people
the
may have
training.
heard
Yes.
those terms before.
Yes.
I've never heard anybody else use them but you.
Yeah, this is something that the IU had used in a training with us a few years ago,
Okay.
and it's still relevant. We just did this
Oh,
with our
very
principals last week, so we still use it.
Okay.
It was one of those things before we used it when we first found out about it. It was like, wow, because we had a tough time interpreting this data until we had an actual pattern to correlate it to.
Sure.
So, I'm gonna go down.
I would say though, whenever Lynette comes and presents to my classes,